In the latest episode of this series, we analyze the start of the canonical adventures of the USS Enterprise D. We discuss the interactions between the crew, the ships, and the meeting of the Q. Now, let's do a deeper dive into the trials of humanity and its grievous nature. While bits and pieces are teased, there isn't a ton of specifics about the details of the court that Picard, Data, Yar, and Troy will be magically transported to. From what the dialogue tells us, the Trek universe begins to diverge from our own around the mid-21st century. Of course, Voyager will move this divergence back to the 90s, but that's a story for another time. In the mid-21st century, we're told of an event known as the post-atomic horror. Unfortunately, one of the problems with this scene is that all of the characters are aware of the events that have occurred, so when they talk about it, they don't use details because they don't have to, they know what's going on. Unfortunately, we don't have all the details, so some of it doesn't make much sense. As far as I can tell, the post-atomic horror would occur, after which the Earth attempts to unite in 2036. Unfortunately, it would fail, and by 2079, humanity comes close to its lowest point that it's ever seen. In a move that Cardassians would be proud of, courts would now have no lawyers, all of them being killed off, and the standard set is that all that are accused are guilty. The judicial system that Picard finds himself in includes the accused, or I guess guilty, on a pedestal with the unwashed masses on either side of them, mocking, jeering, and watching the proceedings as if it was a carnival. The entire affair is administered by the military apparently, and this includes men with machine gun weapons strapped to their hands, because picking things up is stupid and recoil isn't a thing that would shatter bones. The judge is brought out dressed in black and red in an ornate chair and held above everybody. We can't be sure how it worked back then, but we do know that Q is the judge, the jury, and the executioner. It's possible that, at a minimum, the judge would be considered both the person that presides over the case and is the jury, but again, we simply don't know. To Picard, all of this would seem like some kind of form of trick or illusion. He would be warned by Deanna, sensing his doubt that all of this is indeed real. How she would have any idea if it was real or not is beyond me. It is possible that she could sense everyone there, though it's not like her senses have been fooled in the past, nor will we see episodes where she is tricked by illusions, so we'll just take her word on it. I'm sure continuity won't come to bite us in the end. While I could do a step-by-step breakdown of the dialogue, I feel it's more effective to look at the overall feel of what is occurring. Q's attempting to intimidate Picard and co. in the beginning by utilizing quite a lot of pomp and then outward force. The Supreme Being also lets the savagery of the courts keep the defendants off guard. When Tasha assaults one of the guards, it would be the guard who pays with his life and ultimately is dragged out via a rope. Like what we'll see in the future, this entire affair, this court, the way they're being treated, is all just to test Picard and humanity. He challenges their ideals and will constantly go back on his word just to see what they do. We see him consistently state that he will not harm any of them, and then when Tasha gets uppity, because God help Gene actually write something that isn't telling us how great his future is, Q assaults her and freezes her, possibly resulting in her dying if she doesn't get help soon. Picard would hold Q to the fire and to account, and he ultimately heals the injured woman. The future Brony would challenge Picard and ask him if he admits that humanity is a grievously savage race. Picard countering that he would only answer to specific charges. I'm going to be honest, I find this interaction between Q and Picard exceptionally frustrating. It reminds me about what I see within the United States and the incessant arguments between Southern and Northern people today, generally white Southern and Northern people. As anyone can tell you, in the history of my country, the southern states are well known for the slave population that they once had. Though it's funny, not a lot of people talk about the North, who was extremely happy to get stupid rich off this practice, but that's an argument for another time. When slavery was abolished in the United States still had a ton of issues with racism. A large part of this would be centered in the former slave states, the South, disproportionately so. Fast forward 154 years later, and we're still having an issue with the sins of the past. The reason I bring that up is because in today's climate, you will have people in the South who proclaim that all is well, that they aren't racist, and all of that's in the past, and it doesn't happen today. Cheer up, lads, happy times are here again. They do this while either ignoring or not realizing that there still may be systemic issues within Southern states that still negatively impact minorities, and that certain aspects of Southern culture that is accepted can still actually be racist. But then you have the people from the Northwest and Midwest who think that racism apparently only occurs in the South and ignores the fact that their states they live in are just as guilty as the Southern states they hate, if not more so in some instances. And this includes systemic and outright racism. But of course, addressing that would mean that they have to look in the mirror and have to actually do work, and who has the time for that, right? Both sides are obstinate and don't see that in a way they are both right and both wrong. And so, the reason I bring this up is because we see this with both Q and Picard. Yeah, humanity has been a savage race in the Trek universe and still has that propensity. But it has also changed. Things are definitively better. So when Q presents Picard with a list of charges against humanity, and Picard says he sees nothing that they are guilty of, I literally roll my eyes. You can admit that in your past, there has been aberrant things to occur and still be innocent yourself. And of course, Picard's snobbishness just escalates it. Q threatens to kill people until Picard finally admits that humanity is guilty, provisionally. Picard says that he will admit that they are guilty, or at least were. He challenges Q at this point to test them now. He offers to use himself and his crew to see what humanity, what Starfleet is at this moment. I'll pause here a moment and say that I do think that this was the entire point for Q. I'll discuss it in a later episode, but I do believe that Q was in Picard's corner. I'm not convinced that he ever thought that humanity should be held to previous crimes or destroyed. He wanted Starfleet and the Federation to survive, if not thrive. He just knew that Picard and Starfleet would have to admit who they were, who they had been, that they needed to be knocked down a couple of pegs. The court case would basically set the tone for what was to happen at Farpoint Station. For the few that haven't unsubscribed, because I know I didn't say some popular things today, we'll take a look at that on the next Lore Reloaded.